Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining us tonight as we continue to spend this next hour together. And I do hope that you are safe and well, taking care of yourself as well as your family. Let's get right to it with today's opening observations. My good friend Michael Eric Dyson, who's been on this show numerous times, stated some quotes in the past that deal with the present and hopefully about the future. Here's what he says that I think echoes so well the sentiment that many African Americans feel about the coronavirus pandemic we're engaged in, as well as the racial fight that we're all struggling to deal with, crossing this racial divide to bring people to a place called brotherhood and unity. Michael Eric Dyson stated this: all Black people don't have to agree with all Black people in order for Black people to succeed. Say that again. He also stated that charity is no substitute for justice. And he echoed this: Black women must challenge Black men to live up to their best in every arena of the culture, at job, at home, in school, and in religious arenas. And he added, social media itself is not protest. My friends, the bottom line is that we must continue to wage a peaceful protest against all things dealing with this pandemic and the epidemic that we're confronted with. The pandemic being coronavirus, the epidemic being the racism that we must contend with on a daily basis. No justice, no peace. And those are my opening observations. So starting off tonight, I'd like to talk to the Reverend Anthony Evans. He is the president of the National Black Church Initiative. And of course, NBCI is very actively engaged in helping African Americans understand this critical period that we find ourselves living in terms of facing the COVID-19 pandemic. Reverend Evans, tell me about the clinical trials that NBCI is now conducting to help African Americans deal with this coronavirus.
Well, we insisted. The National Black Church Initiative at its core is the largest faith-based preventive health initiative in the country, through about 34,000 churches with an additional 116,000 churches. So about 10 years ago, we realized that we cannot move the issues of Black health outcomes forward unless we got into clinical trials. And we have been engaged into clinical trials with a number of pharma companies for about 10 years. During the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we called our partners at BIO and insisted that all of the companies that are engaging into clinical trials, that African Americans need to be into those clinical trials. Now, we saw this pandemic coming and we wrote a paper about it because of we clearly understand the poor health outcomes of African Americans, our people. And so we insisted that we begin to engage early. So I'm happy to say that we do have several partners who have come up and asked for our assistance of identifying African Americans at various stages of the COVID-19 pandemic to assist in terms of recruitment. We have a strong physician team and a clinical team here to do that, and to make sure that whatever comes down as a possible workable therapy, a vaccine, that African Americans' physiology is involved in that whole process. And by the way, there's over about 600 right now companies who are engaged into some form of therapy or vaccine on COVID-19.
That is good to know that the National Black Church Initiative is engaged in that kind of proactive response to the coronavirus pandemic. I wanted to ask you, what's your take on the president's actions based on what he stated in Tulsa, basically telling some of his staff members to slow down the testing of the COVID-19 because it looks bad when there are a number of spikes and positive cases. And then, of course, the White House saying that he was just joking. And now it turns out that he told a reporter for CBS, no, I don't kid. So here we are. And the president, as you know, has traveled to Arizona for another reelection campaign. He's stopping along the way in Yuma to look at the border wall he's built. The reaction from the White House, or what's your reaction to the White House and this president in terms of dealing with the disastrous effects of the COVID-19?
Well, let me just say in general that our entire health apparatus failed us. CDC failed us. The National Institute of Health failed us. And a number of other folks failed us. Now they're catching up, but they didn't see this coming. They didn't prepare us, and they certainly didn't prepare the Black community at numbers in terms of COVID deaths between 40 and 70%. That's number one. Number two is that I didn't want to bash Trump and leave the other folks off the hook, because the entire health structure failed the Black community and continue to fail the Black community. And so number two, Donald Trump has been a disaster here. He doesn't respect the science. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And the only thing that I can caution people, do not listen to the president when it comes down to preventative health information. The crisis that we have in our community is that we are always dependent on a white institution to give us basic science knowledge. It's all right if this is doing it right, but I prefer that we have a more trusted individual in our community that we can believe in. And that's why the National Black Church Initiative 2 years ago have identified the fact that we need a Surgeon General just for the Black community. Yeah. I know that we have an African-American, Dr. Adams, who is the Surgeon General of the United States, but again, he has failed. He has failed largely because he has not distinguished himself beyond what the president has said. And the Black community don't necessarily trust him. We certainly need the National Medical Association to step up. We certainly need the National Nurses Association to step up. Now, we in a precarious position because our trusted health authorities, whether white or Black, people do not believe in them. But the Black community need trusted voices of calm people who give them correct information. Of course, people have become to rely on Dr. Fauci. I would endorse Dr. Fauci. I prefer an African-American physician telling us exactly what to do, but let's trust Dr. Fauci. Social distancing 6 feet away, do not go in crowds, and wear your mask. And if you have underlying health conditions, do not limit your outdoor activities, and certainly do not go into crowds. I mean, those are basic things that need to get over, but I must tell you that you've been out, I've been out, but in the social settings, only in social settings, African-American young people are not wearing their masks. And we certainly want to urge everybody, whether young and old, to wear your mask and practice social distancing.
You're watching The Kelly Wright Show. We'll be back with more after the break. I need to ask you the role of the Black church in this critical time where we have a crisis of the coronavirus, we have a crisis of the racial disparities that we've seen, and the indifference and the racism that we're dealing with. So we're dealing with things on a multi-tiered level. What role can the Black church do in helping African Americans take a more proactive role to safeguard their families and to protect their income, their businesses, and their future?
Well, the role of the Black church right now is it's very, very important that we pray. It is no question about it. Prayer is an essential element of getting over this crisis, simply because of the mystery of the COVID-19. That's number one. Number two, the role of the church is to speak very clearly to the science. The science is not our enemy here. The science is our helper. So we should identify, like Dr. Fauci and other physicians, Black physicians, hopefully, to really teach us what to do. Social distancing, wear our masks, do not go into large crowds. And certainly, you should, if you have underlying conditions, if you take a pill every day, you should avoid large crowds and going out frequent. So it is to merit what the experts are saying, like Dr. Fauci. That's number one. Number two, the role of the Black church, other than to prayer and to merit the health messaging, is to make sure that we are on the front line. Those of us who are healthy, like myself, on the front line, who are engaged into clinical trials, like the National Black Church Initiative is, and to make sure that there is fair and equity in terms of making sure when that vaccine comes available or that therapy comes available, that the Black community gets it. And that we are now to, that's number three. Number four, we need to push Black politicians. I'm through with Black politicians and all the mouthing that they do. I need for them to really lay down their souls for Black people right now. They need to make sure that those stimulus checks get to Black people. That's number one. Make sure Black people get their tax money back. Number two, they need to begin to negotiate with Trump. I'm not sure why you can't talk to him. Trump, somebody you can negotiate with. I have yet to see Karen Bass take the caucus down to the White House and tell the President of the United States that 40 million Black Americans need your support here. This is what we need. They need to have a 10-point plan that they can work with this administration. It's very simple why you have to work with this administration. They are in power. They have all the marbles. So you have to work with them. Forget what Pelosi says, negotiate for Black people. It is important that you stand up for Black people. Now, Black politicians are just mouthing what the Democrat says. This is not about politics. This is about life and death issues, and it's about Black people. And they should be mouthing what Black people should do. The fifth thing that we should do is that they should force, again, negotiating with the administration, call Attorney Barr right into the Black Caucus meeting, negotiate a very powerful police reform package so that they can stop killing Black people at will. The Supreme Court have just said, Kelly, that the police has immunity. They can shoot you and nobody cares and they get away with it. So Black politicians need to stand up for us. And I don't believe that they're doing they're doing an okay job. If I was to grade them, I would give them a D-. They are not doing what is necessary to do. And remember, at the beginning of this crisis, we didn't even see any Black politicians. We didn't hear from Al Sharpton. They were nowhere around. It took the Black folks to start dying at massive numbers, so that then they start going into convulsions about this stuff. I argued very early, way before in January, that they should have gone down to the White House, cut this deal, made sure that there was PPPs, protective gears in our community, make sure there was enough masks in our community, make sure that there was social distancing. They should have asked the administration for at least, we need about $500 million only in the Black community to get this done. They should also have employed our 4 medical schools, Meharry, Morehouse, Drew, and Howard University. They didn't do any of this. And it speaks to the fact that the Black community need a national emergency plan. So where is the National Urban League? They don't have a plan for us. Where's the National Action Network? They don't have a plan for us. Where is the NAACP? They don't have a plan for us. For all of the posturing all of these national organizations have done over the year, they have never taken the time to reflect that this could occur in the Black community, and we need procedures, a medical procedure, social procedure, political procedures on when it constitutes an emergency, when Black people start dying, what we need to do to protect our home, our properties, and our individuals. And we don't have one. And I'm sad to say that the church has failed to lead in this, but not the National Black Church Initiative. You go on our website, we anticipated even white folks coming into our church shooting us down. That's where we started our first aid national program. And that's why we got out very early during this crisis. That's why we are in clinical trials right now. We're the only Black organization that are pushing pharma, that is pushing bio to include African Americans in clinical trials.
Reverend Anthony Evans, president of the National Black Church Initiative. Before I let you go, there's another issue as well. Of course, today at Ebenezer Church in Atlanta, Georgia, the church that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Had pastored for a few years. Rayshard Brooks is having a private funeral service there as his family bids him farewell. And of course, this is another act of violence that took place between a police officer and a Black man, Rayshard Brooks being shot in the back. One of the officers that is now publicly speaking out saying what happened to Rayshard Brooks was a tragedy. We'll continue to follow what happens in that developments with the prosecution of that officer. But by and large, there are whites and Blacks protesting in the streets of America, shouting Black Lives Matter and white silence equals violence. And other whites have been saying, you know, all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. To racial reconciliation, what does the National Black Church Initiative espouse?
Well, this is a great time for America, despite what people are saying. Finally, we have arrived at a time of crisis, of moral crisis. Only when you're at a time of moral crisis can we actually get something done. And I'm glad that the politicians are paying service to getting police reform done, but we need radical police reform. And let me just say one thing about police reform, because we need to make sure that all of our police are psychologically fit to be police officers in our country. We need them to be tested at least 4 times a year, once every quarter. That being said, the National Black Church Initiative is going to be working with the Reverend Fred Luda used to be the former president of the Southern Baptist Convention, and a number of our denominational leaders. We will unveil in the coming week a radical racial healing program that we engage into the white church for the next 10 years. It's going to take 10 years for us as a Christian community, or as a religious community, to come together. I'm going to be briefing Reverend Luda very soon and other national leaders around the country. This will be a $25 to $50 million project that will be paid for by the church, foundations who want to give, or individuals who want to give. But the church itself, certainly the Church of Jesus Christ, must come together. And the Church of Jesus Christ must provide the moral leadership for bringing all religions together for a healing process in this country.
But we have to bring it together. So I'm delighted to hear what the National Black Church Initiative is doing to help in that regard, because that is a conversation that America must boldly and courageously, I believe, have. And not just a conversation, but to actually act on what we talk about. Like you said earlier, time is over for pontificating. It's time to start.
Yeah, it's an overdue conversation that has really started. I didn't start it. It started way before even Martin King. But yeah. Martin continued that tradition, and nobody else picked that tradition up. So what we are going to do, we're going to reclaim that. The Christian church is going to reclaim that. But not just the Black Christian church. We're going to provide the leadership, the moral underpinning, the theological underpinning for that particular situation. But we're going to join with our white brethren in a sincere effort. And that's why I said it's going to cost money. And I'm putting a price tag between $25 to $50 million. And it's going to take 10 years to bring this together. And I'm very happy to be able to reveal these extraordinary healing plans that we have for this country.
Well, I stand with you in that. And this show is available to you, a platform for you, as well as the Southern Baptists, Black and white churches coming together, Muslims coming together, everybody, Protestants, Jews, Catholics, Black, whites, everybody coming together. And you lead me to one quote from Martin Luther King Jr. He stated, "It is not possible to be in favor of justice for some people and not be in favor of justice for all people." And that is certainly what the National Black Church Initiative is apparently working on. And kudos to you. I stand at the ready to help you in any way that I can on this program. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll be back with more of the program after this. Welcome back to the program. So as you just heard from Reverend Anthony Evans, the National Black Church Initiative is very much concerned about what's going on with regard to coronavirus and a myriad of other issues that go along with that. Joining me now is Dr. Yolandra Hancock. She is a public health expert. She's also a pediatrician. And Doc, it's good to have you with us, but it almost sounds like we're doing the same thing over and over again, and that's reminding Black folk, be careful out here, because this coronavirus, as we've stated on this show, before the rest of the world was talking about it, you talked about it, others came on and talked about it, how this was going to disproportionately and adversely impact the African-American community. And it has not changed. With all the states reopening, we've seen an upsurge in the coronavirus. The virus hasn't gone anywhere, right?
Right. We're still in the first wave, like these conversations about second and third waves. I'm like, no, we're just in a tidal wave. It just continues to flow because we are not practicing public health measures, like one of the most important being wearing a mask. Complacency in the face of COVID is really not an option.
You know, Dr. Anthony Fauci is testifying before the congressional hearing, and he's basically stating the same thing that you are: wear a mask. This is not a time to feel that we have conquered this, because if we fail to be proactive about wearing a mask to safeguard ourselves and others, we will find ourselves back on lockdown in many states.
Yes, he's absolutely right. What we do know is that there was a study done looking at how long it would take to decrease what's called the R naught of COVID-19, or the infectivity of COVID-19. And the length of time was about 28 days. If all of us collectively could work together to wear a mask whenever we're out for 21 days, that would significantly decrease the infectivity of COVID, and we could go back to business as normal. But as long as people see wearing a mask as optional, we will continue to be in this Groundhog Day experience where cases will go up, states will shut down, cases will go down, states will reopen, people will not wear a mask, states will shut down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's really, I'm not surprised you have to enforce the wearing of a seatbelt, right? People were encouraged to wear a seatbelt, but it wasn't until there was a $250 fine that people actually used it. Car seats, same example. We know that without a car seat, children are at significant risk of dying in a car accident, even a minor one. But it wasn't until we started enforcing penalty and making it not just a mandate, but an enforceable mandate, that people change their behavior. And unfortunately, here in America, that has been our norm. Until we are forced to do what's right and healthy, we see it as an option. And we are in the position that we are currently in. Over almost 400,000 new cases in the past week of COVID-19. The good news is that we're decreasing in terms of the number of deaths, which then further encourages people to play the game, to run the risk, which is why we see close to 400,000 new cases in 1 week's period of time.
You're watching The Kelly Wright Show. Back with more after the break. Dr. Yolanda, you come on this show every week and you're giving us good information to help us and to challenge us to be proactive. What else can be done if people are still refusing to follow good, sound science and the advice from an accomplished medical doctor like yourself?
Two things. One, minimize, thank you for that. One, minimize your own risk. Wear your mask. Make sure that you're not out and about as if this is business as usual. I went running at the park recently, and of the 200 or so people there, myself, my best friend, and one family of 4 had masks on. But we were protecting ourselves and we were protecting other people. Like when we wear a mask, I'm protecting them, not me. The second is to make sure that my body's ready just in case I develop COVID-19. Making sure my nutrition is on point, making sure that I'm taking the right supplements, because the inevitability of us coming across COVID-19 is high when people refuse to do the right thing. And that's the time that we who are doing the right thing have to be proactive in making sure that our immune systems are prepared in the likelihood of us developing the infection, to be honest with you. That's how I've prepared my family. That's how I've prepared my friends. I've shared my COVID-19 care plan for free so that anyone who needs it knows what to do so that they don't end up in a hospital, in an ICU on a vent.
But for the viewers of this show, share with us your Dr. Yola's ingredients for a successful nutritional program that will help us in this age of coronavirus.
Definitely. So, the recommendation is to eat 3 to 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, but 75% of Americans do not. Therefore, supplementation is allowed and highly encouraged. Even for myself, I still take vitamins, even though I meet that standard. Those vitamins include B6, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin A, and zinc. All of those have key roles in boosting your immune system. You also want to make sure that you're getting enough sleep. You want to make sure that you're doing at least moderate exercise, and as much as you can in the space of stress, trying to manage your stress so your cortisol isn't all over the place. If nothing else, cut back on your sugar. 25 grams, no more than 6 teaspoons for women. 50 grams, no more than 12 teaspoons of added sugar for men, because sugar also suppresses your immune system and facilitates increased risk of infection. Those things by themselves are sufficient. And then if and when you develop COVID-19, make sure you have a pulse oximeter, measure your oxygen level. Make sure you're doing deep breathing exercises to make sure that air is transmitted through all of your lung space, because that's going to be very, very critical in how COVID-19 attacks your lungs. The great news, Mr. Wright, is that we're starting to see some improvements in terms of what we're using to treat COVID-19, and I'd love to talk more about that on your next show.
We'll do it as soon as you can possibly get back on here. We'll definitely do it. I appreciate you so much, Dr. Yolanda Hancock. Of course, she is a pediatrician, works with all the little kitties to take care of them. And I love watching her work on Facebook. Make sure you check her out because she has a lot of good information, just like she unpacked today. Thank you so much, Doc. We'll talk to you soon about those other factors that we can take advantage of. As a matter of fact, why wait? If you want to, you can do it now.
Let's talk about it. So there's new promising treatments for COVID-19 in terms of medications. I always go to nutrition first. Nutrition for me is as important as prescription medication, but we're seeing a role for something called dexamethasone. It's an old school steroid that we've historically used for things like asthma. I use it in asthma for my little ones to decrease the amount of inflammation in the body. And that's the role for dexamethasone with COVID-19. What we do know that not only does COVID-19 cause an infection, but it causes a very severe inflammatory response. The body's ability to fight off COVID also facilitates a lot of this inflammation, something called a cytokine storm. What dexamethasone does is decreases the amount of cytokine storm that happens, which decreases the amount of inflammation that results in long-term damage and likely results in people needing breathing support, like being on a ventilator. With SARS and MERS, we tried to use it, but it actually can suppress the immune system and decrease the body's ability to fight off the infection. But that hasn't been the case in preliminary studies. This study was released in a press release, not yet in a peer-reviewed journal. As soon as it does, I will review it, critique it, and let the audience know what we have found. But that in combination with an antiviral like remdesivir is showing significant promise, not just in terms of shortening the length of time of infection, but also in terms of decreasing mortality. One study demonstrated, and again, has not yet been peer reviewed, but it demonstrated decreasing mortality by a third. Can you imagine a third less people dying from COVID-19? So let's pray about it. Let's pray that this is actually going to manifest into something amazing, because dexamethasone has been around for a while. It's relatively cheap and it makes sense.
Indeed, it does. And there's so much more I could talk to you about, but finally, what role can the church play in helping African Americans and Latino Americans get through this?
They play a very critical role for communities of color, particularly Latinx and African American communities. The church is at the core of our communities, either in Christianity or Catholicism, right? And our religious leaders serve in the same positioning that some folks have put our president. Our religious leaders have that same amount of influence. So instead of compelling people to show back up for church and putting themselves at risk, what I would compel our leaders, our religious and faith-based leaders to do is to encourage people to wear masks, to be responsible, to be Christ-like in their daily activity, to remind them that we have to love our brothers, John 16, right? By loving each other as Christ would love us. That means wearing a mask, practicing social distancing, and staying at home if and when you can, when you're sick, if you have the ability to, because you have paid sick leave. All of those are ways to demonstrate what Christ would be doing in this situation. Selfishness is not an option in Christianity. You have to love each other. And if they can say and recurrently repeat that message in everything that they do, at the end of each message, don't forget to wear your mask. Mask up, COVID down. That's what we need to hear with every Tuesday, Wednesday night Bible study, Sunday service, 10 to 11 to 12 to 6:30, the communion service, all of it. Those messages need to be reiterated over and over again so that we as Christians, women and men of faith, feel compelled to do it in the same way that we feel compelled to do everything else that God has mandated us to do.
Mask up, COVID down. I like that. Doc, thank you as always. All right, back with more of the show after this. Welcome back to the program. So I am delighted to introduce to you a woman behind the scenes in music, yet she's in front of the scenes in gospel music because she is pushing so many people to a level where people around the world can discover their talent. She is Ebony Funderburk, and for more than 20 years now, she's been involved in gospel music, actively engaging and caring for her artists and helping her artists get a message out there to the world. And normally when you talk about gospel music, Ebony, welcome to the program first and foremost.
Thank you for having me.
When you talk about gospel music, you're talking about infusing positivity in the midst of negativity. And certainly we need to hear from people like yourself and the artists that you represent now more than ever.
Absolutely. The premise of gospel is spreading the good news of Jesus Christ, of course. We're always going to highlight and talk about and promote that. But also, I think gospel has really been an intrinsic part of our community. Church community is one of the centers of the African American community. It has been the hub since we've been here in America, our faith and our belief. And of course, this is where we come to really find that encouragement and that source of strength to make it and carry on from day to day. Absolutely.
Ebony, what role are you playing in this? I mean, are you considering moving more people into this engagement to talk about, you know, we can be our brother's keeper and stop being our brother's killer. Let's bring everybody together, not only through the power of our music, but through the empowerment of our voices.
Absolutely. One of the things that I started doing was just having candid conversations on my social platforms. I have a nice following, it's growing, but I wanted to bring together some voices that people may not hear from to talk about this issue of racial and race relations when we talk about, my brain just went blank, but when we're talking about the infrastructure of race and racism within our communities and how that affects the church. Because if we talk about Americanized Christianity, Christianity fundamentally in this country really was steeped in a lot of white supremacist and racist ideology. So as we're moving forward and we're talking about unveiling that and removing the covers and addressing it, those are conversations that we have to have amongst ourselves as a body of believers. And sometimes those conversations are very uncomfortable, because then you're now having to deal with that, when we talk about the most segregated day of the week is Sunday. Well, why is it the most segregated day of the week? It's not just because we don't like you, we don't want to fellowship with you, but historically, the church started out fundamentally as a segregated hour. We weren't even allowed to be amongst white people during church hours. We had to be in the balcony or outside when the gospel was going forth. We ended up saying, hey, we'll start our own churches and we'll find a way to fellowship and praise the Lord in an environment that we're comfortable in. And this rolls into what you're seeing today. So when we're talking about this issue of race, we can't leave out the history of race in this country. They go hand in hand. And those are the uncomfortable conversations that we have to have amongst each other. I think sometimes for the Christian church, we don't want to talk about those things because we don't want to acknowledge, that we're not perfect, and that our original sin goes far beyond that of having discussions on abortion or homosexuality. But racism is right up there, if not higher, in a lot of our books than the other conversations that we seem to have in the church and skip over on our side of the fence.
Agreed. Anytime you talk about these issues of race and the disparities and the inequities that do exist,
Right.
From healthcare all the way to police and community policing and the trust and distrust between both of those groups, Blacks and police. We got a lot of work to do, and talking is part of getting it done, having these conversations that can be painful, but out of that pain, hopefully we can get rid of the poison and turn it into power. I'm talking to Ebony Funderburk. She is a dynamic woman of faith and also a powerhouse in gospel music in terms of helping a lot of people expand their careers. We'll come back with her after the break with more. Welcome back to the program. So I'm talking to Ebony Funderburk. She has spent 20 plus years in the music industry, and in particular, she has kept her focus on Black music, gospel music, and she's helped a lot of artists rise to, would you say, superstar status within gospel circles?
There are some A-level gospel artists in there, yes, that I've definitely worked with.
Give me an example of some of the artists that you've represented.
I've worked with Smokey Norfolk, CeCe Winans, Marvin Sapp, Bishop Marvin Sapp. I worked with him on a couple of records. I've worked, Ty Tribbett, Vashawn Mitchell. I've been a part of big records like Never Would Have Made It, and CeCe Winans. Oh my gosh, the list just goes on. Nobody Greater.
Yeah.
It's just a lot. It's a lot.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you and how this all began, because I understand you're the graduate of, I'll let you tell the world the school that you're a graduate of.
I went to the illustrious Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, the HU, the original HU and the classy HU. Absolutely.
Because, having worked in the Virginia Beach and Hampton Roads area and getting to know Dr. William Harvey,
yes,
the president, the chancellor of Hampton University, I know the pride that goes into all of those alums of Hampton University like yourself. So I had to let you brag a little bit on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And so when you got involved in the music industry, in particular gospel music, did you ever think you would reach the heights that you've reached now to be such a major influencer?
Absolutely not. I didn't know what I was going to do. But, I think God just put me where he wanted me to be. I actually went to Hampton University thinking I was going to be a sitcom scriptwriter. That's what I wanted to do, go to Hollywood. And he set me on a path in radio. broadcast productions and broadcast journalism. And here I am. I came to Nashville, Tennessee over 20 years ago thinking maybe I can break in as a singer, and ended up getting hired at a label, and the rest is history. You know, I guess when God orders your steps, there you go.
Well, it's a great history, and that I thought I haven't heard a lot from the gospel music industry as it pertains to what's going on right now. And I think in our previous segment, you explained very well that of what's happening. And I just think it's so necessary to hear from the people like Marvin Sapp and Smokey Norfolk and yourself, because of what you contribute. CeCe Winans, all of you guys have contributed so much to the industry and beyond, because you have a global impact. So where has gospel music gone? Because it isn't your grandmother's gospel music today.
No, it's not. You know, I think like every genre, music evolves based on the generation. And, you know, back in the day at Edwin Hawkins and Dottie Peebles, some of that music was actually considered more contemporary than it was traditional. A Mighty Clouds of Joy, you know. But then we, you know, our generation, we look at that music and we say it's very traditional. And what's contemporary for us will be down the road looked as traditional with my kids, you know? So I think music really just evolves based on the generation and the taste. And, but it's all impactful and it all has a place. And just like with music that services everyone, so does gospel music. Gospel music's going to service your great grandmother all the way down to your 7, 8, 9-year-old child. They're going to find something that, you know, they're going to love in it. It's going to be inspirational. And again, it's going to encourage them to keep going every day. And we need it as a community of people.
Ebony, I appreciate you. Ebony Funderburk, and I'll just close this out saying you're 100% right about where the church is, and I think you're spot on about that. And I think the song that says it best is "I Need You Now" by Smokey Norfolk. Yeah. And certainly we can all look towards each other and collectively as a community say, "God, we need you now." So appreciate you coming on the program, Ebony.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely, Kelly.
All right. God bless you. Keep on keeping on. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. I want to thank all of my guests who appeared on tonight's program. Certainly, I appreciate each and every one of them, and I appreciate you for taking the time out to watch. You are valuable to me and the rest of this who support this program. Let me leave you with a final word. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stated this: "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope." Dwell on that. Think about that tonight as we continue to strive to be righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
I'll tell you what I see. I see God coming back to save humanity. Take a look around. I'll tell you what I see. Christ stepping in to stop our insanity. Yeah. I've taken a look around, and I'll tell you what I see. Our children safe because peace abounds.